So I've had the bike for a week now, 2021 Trek Slash. First thing I had an issue with was pretty standard new bike, come from a bike shop or come from a manufacturer or whatever. Headset wasn't really greased and it was real quick, creaky, really quick. The setup itself was alright, they set the bar roll up nicely and everything was square and lined up, but really creaky after 2 rides. So I pulled the headset apart, fixed that up, greased it all up, smooth as butter now obviously. After another couple of rides, some creaking coming from around here somewhere. Turns out it was this bolt was a little bit loose, which you can't actually get to without taking the crank off, unless you put an Allen key. So you take it's 2 Allen keys into the shop. So you take the far Allen key out, the non-drive side Allen key out, Allen bolt out, and then put your Allen key through there long ways, and get some leverage on the Allen key, and turn it from this side. So obviously act like you're going opposite thread when you're turning it from this side, to loosen and tighten that if you don't want to take the crank off. But anyway, that was a little bit loose and I think that was creating most of the creaking. But while I had the crank off and whatnot, I pulled everything apart. I've greased all the points, greased all the shafts, all the mating surfaces. Everything's had a little bit of grease without really greasing anything externally to attract dust. So that's all good, feels crisp, seems like it's going to be good. Hopefully that gives me some longevity with a quiet frame. So things you just have to do. A lot of guys will just send it straight back to the bike shop. Here it's creaky everywhere, and it's their responsibility to take care of it for sure, being one that they provided you a brand new item, so a brand new bike. It should be in brand new condition, it should be workable, it should be functional. So kind of their responsibility, but it doesn't matter. It's also your responsibility to make sure your bike's good anyway outside of that. So I could have sent it back, but I like doing things myself. Moving on, the long cranks, riding it around with long cranks, it's great for commuting, it's terrible for everything else. As soon as you get on the dirt, it sucks. It's alright for climbing, I can climb well and efficiently when I'm sitting down, but when I get up to pedal, it sucks. I've got a little thing from when I hurt my back years ago, my right hip, quite often, it's kind of both hips, but it's more so my right hip. When I ride bikes with long cranks, it's like something falls out of place or like a tendon or a muscle slips over something, and I kind of get stuck like this, and I've got to kind of get off the bike and get it to the right spot and kind of straighten things back out and get everything back where it should be. And I only ever have that pop out so if I work for long periods and I'm sitting down for long periods and I go to get up, that happens. And it also happens when I ride bikes with long cranks, and it happens almost it's almost like clockwork. I know when it's going to happen and I know where it's going to happen, and when it happens it sucks, but I can kind of be prepared for it. So anyway, long cranks, get out for sure. No bike should ever come with long cranks unless it's a roadie or a commuter. The 175s are too long for everybody. I don't care how tall you are, too long if you're on a mountain bike. I'll talk about the fork in a sec. The rear shock. So the rear shock has this proprietary setup. So it's got the through shaft, which I don't know, seems alright. To me, it's an unnecessary. It's not much different to the ABP, the active brake pivot. It's an unnecessary addition. You can definitely get away with a standard shock, standard mounting, standard everything, and you'll have no problems. But they like to do proprietary stuff and push the limits and see if they can come up with something that's going to be better than the standard and what's available. So through shaft feels okay. Like I said, don't really notice it's better or worse. When this setup is right on point and right on that right PSI, like any air sprung bike, if you're a few PSI south or north of your point, it's going to feel not great. It's not going to feel as good as it does when it's on point. If you've never had your bike on point, then you probably don't understand the difference between 3 PSI here or 3 PSI there. But when you get it perfect, when you get it tuned for absolute speed and safety at speed and control at speed, you'll know. So it's no different to any other air sprung bike like that. It doesn't stand out as, oh my god, this back end's so much better. But when I do have it right, it's smooth as butter, it's fast, it pumps off of things well, carries reasonable speed. 29er obviously helps a little bit with the speed. Helps in some scenarios with the speed, and in other scenarios it's no difference. There's no difference. 27.5, 29er. It feels the same as my patrol for speed, for carrying speed for now, but I can climb up things easier. The 29er will definitely climb over things easier. Much more pleasant to climb over kind of rougher stuff, as long as the suspension's right again. So the rear shock's not much different. It is leaking a fair bit of oil, but I think it's just an air can seal. They all do that. The RockShox air can seals are always a little bit loose and a little bit weepy. They just weep. So if you got a RockShox shock, you know that. You've seen it a million times. So yeah, there's not a lot of setup there. I will end up putting a coil on it, but we'll see how I go with that. I'll elaborate on that later. I've got a lot to say about it. Fork, C1 air spring, so the newer Debonair style air spring. So you've got Debonair in the 2019 2020 forks, which is the best air spring ever made. The 2021 Debonair spring, the C1, there's much more debate on whether it's any good. For me, I've gone for 2 tokens. I've been no token, 1 token, 2 tokens, 3 tokens, back to 2 tokens, and I think I'm going back to 3 tokens. So it's almost good. The other day I said, yeah, it's killer. 2 tokens feels really, really good. I went and rode some more steeper technical trails, Twisted Gum, trails up at Waterfall Gully, and when I'm coming in and out and on the brake on a steeper kind of bumpy section, there's still a little bit of it just disappears on you. The spring support isn't consistent. So when it's rebounding, when it's coming back out, it's almost like got a dual speed of rebound, only in certain circumstances. So it's way more pronounced with 1 token. You can feel that 100% with 1 token. It's just got this real soft spot. It's like firm off the top, like keeps you up in the travel, little firmer off the top, and then it falls through, and then it's really firm down the bottom, and it ramps you back out, and it kind of spits you around. So 1 token, definitely no go. 2 tokens is controllable and better, but it doesn't have that consistent, confident control and trust that the B1 Debonair spring has. So the 2019-2020 Debonair spring. So I'm going to go the 3 tokens again, and I'm going to see if I can find a sweet spot there. But that puts me pretty much, from memory of testing it just before with the 3 tokens, it feels very similar to the old Solo Air suspension. So 3 gives it that nice, firm, consistent stroke that you need out of the Solo Air, whereas 2 and 1 with the Solo Air feels more or less the same as this with 1 and 0. So I'm thinking 3 will hopefully get rid of that soft spot in the middle of the mid-stroke. I think it will, but I just don't think it's going to be better than the B1 air spring. So I don't know. I'm not sold on the bike yet. I don't like what I was going to go into with this. It's going to get a bit complex, but I want to get the fork out of the way. I don't like the high bottom bracket. I need a high bottom bracket because of these cranks for the moment, but shorter cranks are obviously available, and they're the standard. To me, they're the industry standard. If you're a rider, they're the rider's standard. If you're a rider who predominantly rides downhill, you're definitely a short cranker. You're definitely a 165er. There's no doubt about it. You might be a 170, but you're definitely a 165er. You're definitely not a 175er. If you're a 175er, lose my number for sure. No, just kidding. With the bottom bracket height, so at 32% sag, which is where this thing feels good. Now, if I want to, I would potentially go higher in the sag to get a more linear stroke and a more, so it's a little less soft off the top and a little less firm down the bottom. But I can't go any higher in the sag because it's already in a poor riding position. And when I tip it into steep stuff, it's already feeling like front heavy, like that back end wants to come up. So I need that back end down a bit. So perfect for a mullet, absolutely perfect in this configuration. The way they built the bottom bracket in relation to the way the shock ramps up and the amount of shock travel. So you have to run it down at 32%, 31% to get that back end to be smooth. You have to run it down there to have a reasonable geometry. And you have to run a short... You don't have to. I think you have to run a short crank to keep yourself free. It's got a wider chain line as well, which is another thing I want to talk about, which kind of plays into this. The wider chain line, it's a 55mm versus a 52 chain line. So the cranks are a little wider, which means your pedals are out a little wider, which means I've got more chance of a side, clipping the sides of a trail with the pedals. And also being longer, it amplifies the chances of clipping pedals longer, because now I'm closer down to the bottom of the trail and I'm further out to the side of the trail. So I don't like the 55 chain line. They've obviously done it to keep clearance on these chain stays because the bike's quite fat and quite sizable. It's still got the standard Boost 148 rear hub, so if the chain stays don't clash with a narrower crank, with a 52mm chain line crank, I'm going to run a 52 chain line crank because that's the only short cranks I can get. I can't get a 55. 52 chain line crank, put a zero offset chain ring on it instead of a 3mm offset, which is your standard Boost. That'll bring me back out towards that 55, but it'll keep my cranks in. And the other thing I don't really like, and the only reason I go on 55 with the zero offset chain ring is because if I go a Boost chain ring, I'll be touching the chainstay with the chain ring. So the chain ring itself has to be out. But even then, when I watch the chain line rubbing, from the back, that chain line isn't perfectly aligned until you're in 9 or 10. So right down the bottom is perfect alignment. I would like perfect alignment to be more 6 or 7 or 8. But probably 7. Probably 7 would be good. So when I'm up on first gear, it's really, really whack, and it just makes for a noisy chain. It just makes for a noisy drivetrain when you're climbing, regardless of what you do to it. So I don't like the idea of a wider chain line. I think obviously the 55 chain line is made for Super Boost. I'm just going to wear things out quicker. I can absolutely see it's going to wear things out quicker. As for the stiffness of the frame, doesn't feel overly stiff, but it doesn't feel flexy. It's not overly light. Obviously, it's alloy, 160, 170, push core and a double down at the back, DHF at the front, just an EXO, and it's 16.4 kilos as you see it with my pedals on. So heavy, but not prohibitive. I did one of the fastest climbs I've done. So it was 34 degrees. I went up, it's on Strava, I went up Pioneer Women's, the top half Pioneer Women's, but from the Twisted Gum, bottom of Twisted Gum, up Pioneer Women's, I call it lap climb left. That's what it's named on Strava. So you go straight up that fire road, hang a lefty, instead of going onto the single track straight away, you hang a lefty, do the quick pinch, and then you're onto the single track all the way up to the top of the trail. And I was within maybe 15 seconds of my fastest time on a 15-minute climb. So she climbs, it's no worries on the climbs, but yeah, short cranks, lower bottom bracket would have been perfect on this thing. Otherwise, it's definitely going to mullet. 29ers need a mullet anyway, in my opinion. But I'm going to keep riding it as a full 29er until at least I get my cranks. Can't put a smaller back wheel on until I've got that clearance with the cranks. The brakes are okay. The back one needs a bleed, but otherwise they're powerful. Obviously, being codes, 200 front, 180 rear. It feels okay, but I'm not over the moon on it yet. Definitely not over the moon over it yet. But we'll see. We'll keep kicking on, and sooner or later, it's just going to hit that sweet spot, and I know I'm just going to be squealing about it. So let's give it time.